Welcome. Thank you for tuning in NeptuneKnives. This will be a 7-point review of the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 folder. Overall, to me, this knife is an outstanding value. Typically on my channel, I don't make such positive statements. But with this knife, I feel comfortable doing that because of my experience testing it over the years. In older videos of me taking this knife apart, testing the quality of the hardware, to even then me swapping out the different parts, pocket clips, screws, scales, blades, and seeing that overall consistency in the CNC of these knives and manufacturing, to the multiple videos I have of testing the compression lock in a variety of scenarios. So when Spyderco set out to make a folding knife that really represented their company's ideas, design innovations, the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 really accomplished that. Because if you look at the typical way you would use a steel in a knife, if you were to go the frame lock route, it would be very heavy and cumbersome. But then the next method would be to create a liner lock. But if we see, for example, on an Emerson knife, if you don't want to compromise the thickness of the actual liner lock, then you end up with 2 liners and then 2 G10 scales. And if you want the G10 scales to be rather durable, they can't be too thin, and then you end up with this kind of thick knife similar to an Emerson. So when Spyderco came up with this knife, I think it was very innovative that they didn't sacrifice the thickness of the liner lock. They didn't sacrifice the durability of using steel liners. But then they were able to create a slimmer profile by having the nested steel liners, where the liners are set inside the G10. But then also by having a new type of lock called this compression lock, which is even stronger. So they were able to accomplish stronger, more compact, and at the same time, same durability into something that we've never seen before. The nested steel liners also helped create structural rigidity, because rather than having 4 individual handle pieces held together by the hardware, you now have the securely fit liners inside the G10, and then all you have to do is hold the overall, basically 2 handle sides together. And then another ingenuitive implement is the lanyard tube. Typically on a knife, it's just going to have a lanyard hole. But what Spyderco did was to kind of minimalize the construction, simplify it, but at the same time, again, create more rigidity, was they created this kind of backspacer slash lanyard hole. The lanyard tube itself has 2 narrow ends, and it's press fitted into both the steel and the G10. And if you go back in older videos, you can see the difficulty it is. For anyone who's ever tried to take apart this knife, it's very securely fit. It serves as a spacer that's very solid, no hardware. It serves also a way to keep everything in line, or anything from shifting these directions. And then also, it's a lanyard tube. The next thing then would be the pivot bushing inside. And that spacer keeps a certain distance between the blade and contacting the scales. And it provides us a constant sort of smoothness. You can't over tighten it too much, really. So you see the main difference here, and the reason why it's not possible for individuals who own the knife to modify the knife and fix the tension of the pivot is that you can see the actual bushing is part of the, part of the pivot. Like the 2 screws on each side screw directly into this middle tube right here, and what you get then is this set space for the blade to rotate around. And unfortunately, because of that, it's not like a Sebenza where, if everyone knows, the Sebenza has an actual separate washer or bushing. So you can, that little piece right there. And so in those videos, when they show the manufacturing and the making of this knife, an individual can sand down this bushing right here to get to be the precise space, so that when you then put it in the knife, you get that perfect tension. Along with that, though, of course, the thing is, though, you need the hardware itself, the actual screws, to have a finer threading. And the screw on the left is actually the Sebenza screw, and the threading, the spacing between each thread is finer than the Paramilitary 2. So when it comes time to like adjust the tension on Paramilitary 2 and you're tightening down the pivot, it's hard to get a precise tension to where, one, you can't sand down and modify the pivot, and then two, the screws can't provide an exact tension as much as a Sebenza screw. And this is the same thing that happens on the Grayman folders, where they have the same bushing as the Sebenza to create that perfect space. And if it's not perfect, an individual can go in there and hand sand down the bushing, but then the hardware, the actual threading here, is not as precise as a Chris Reeve knife to be able to get it tightened down and have the screws hold without Loctite. But the tolerances of the pivot are not that crucial, because I've tested in another video where if I loosen the screws completely and then do a variety of lock testing, the knife doesn't unlock. You can go back and find that one where I test the Yojimbo and the Sabo. But the next thing also then is the strength of this lock. In another video I have where I have a 50-pound weight hanging on the blade, and I'm pulling it and jerking in a variety of directions, and the knife doesn't unlock. The muscles in your wrist will sooner give out than the knife itself unlocking. And then I've also tested this lock up in muddy situations in water and dirt. And in that situation too, it's fairly easy to get the dirt to move out. You can just shake it out. Within 1 or 2 deployments, you can get the knife to lock up. It won't jam on you. You have to double check, but it'll still function. So this compression lock is very comparable to an axis lock by Benchmade. It's safe and fast to deploy because your hand doesn't travel underneath the blade when you unlock it. It's convenient with gloves to disengage. And this knife has given me no detent issues. So in addition to having the pivot bushing space it out, and then also to where the lock bar actually makes contact, the detent here, you can feel it sits on the detent the entire time, and then just at the very end is the final, like, where it lets go and it locks up. So the action is very smooth. From the options available by Spyderco in terms of compression locks, the Paramilitary 2 is still the best one in terms of feel. It's the smoothest, it also is the easiest to use, and it seems to be the most well thought out. The traction of this knife when wet isn't very good, and the knife seems to be made for people who have perhaps a smaller palm, where they're able to get a better grip, especially in a hammer grip, where, for example, if you have a glove that's very padded, it's very easy for the knife to move around. If you do use the knife though in a wet situation, that is perhaps the one time I've really had to open this knife up, coat the liners with some wax, really give it a thorough clean through. Make a mental note to not use this knife around acidic environments or also too much water. So when I've been thinking about the design of this knife in terms of being a tactical knife, the name Paramilitary 2 definitely suits the knife. It wouldn't work with another name, and I think it wouldn't sell as good. But realistically, I don't think this knife has anything military about it. So when it comes to, for example, having a secure grip, you can have a larger knife like the military, which feels much more secure in the hand. Or you can have a smaller knife have more ergonomics, more aggressive ergonomics, such as like a United Cutlery, a Karambit, or even thickness like an Emerson. But what this knife has is sort of a round smoothness to the contouring. Nothing too overly aggressive, not a very, very pronounced kind of arch here to sit in your palm and kind of push against it, or not even a very aggressive choil here, or even aggressive here. It's kind of smooth overall. There is a lack of jimping to snag on the gloves. The penetration of this knife is definitely good though. It may not look, to some people, including myself, it may not look like an aggressive knife, especially in comparison to a normal military. Compared to a lot of overbuilt tactical knives, they seem to have forgotten that a knife looks more deadly. A knife is more deadly overall when it's like this, where it's kind of thin and pointy. This will slice and this will pierce very easily into something. So here, Spyderco really emphasized function over any sort of visual form. In terms of deployment, you have a wide variety of options, and that makes it very good. You can put a zip tie on here so it can wave out of your pocket. You have a large hole that works for a variety of opening methods, different hands. You can use it with your gloves on, gloves off. You have four-way pocket clip. So if, for example, you're more used to pulling it out, tip down and then flicking it open, you can do that. You can, if you're used to tip up, if you have it in your left pocket, and even though you're a right-handed individual like myself, you can pull it out and flick it open this way. And because of that, it strikes all the right chords for tactical deployment. And with the large finger hole, it's not as demanding for you to have fine motor skills. It's easier to access that hole if you're not paying attention, you're distracted, and still deploy the knife. And if you're used to it and you practice, you have a variety of methods you can carry the knife and deploy it still. In terms of using this knife in a fight, if you learn to hold the knife in complete grip, where the knife, then the narrowness here sits into that area of your hand, then definitely this is very secure and it's fine. I would recommend it. It's strong. It has the safety trail if it disengages on you. It has a strong lock, very secure grip. And predominantly you're pressing on the G10. You can feel it sit here and here. Now, if you're in the saber grip, I don't really know, because at that point you're just kind of relying on your thumb to keep the knife in position. There isn't any jimping here. It's even slippery right now. If my hand's a little bit perspiring, I don't feel very, very secure. And then worse would be than the hammer grip. In this grip, unless you have a smaller hand, definitely it can slide through because of this narrowness right here. It can just kind of move into that fleshy part. So I don't recommend hammer grip. So it's usable if you know how to hold the knife, if you properly train with it, and the type of cutting you're going to do. If you're going to do slashing, then you can hold it in a hammer grip, no problem. If you do any type of stabbing motions, then you would have to use this complete grip. And it's strange because the G10 has this texturing canvas look to it, but then on the actual edges where you're actually holding, it's smooth, slick. It just has a very slick outer edge to it. If it could have a couple notches here, I think that would be a very nice addition, and even kind of offset the design of having jimping here a little bit back here would help make it feel more secure. You know, since the knife wasn't really designed specifically for a fighting situation, the blade shape overall, when you go for forward motions, you're pretty much still going to have to do a slight little nick. You can't really do a forward poking motion unless it's a little bit underhand. So that's a little limiting. But the lock, like I said in the older video, with the 50 pounds on it and pulling it around randomly and aggressively, that dynamic force didn't make the lock disengage. And also, even with my testing of the lock being loose, say for example the lock didn't give up but the hardware did, the actual threading of the screws, even when untightened, the lockup was still secure because of the rest of the hardware holding it together. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at neptuneknives@gmail.com. And also look for me on Instagram. I've decided to start using that medium. Look forward to more 7-point reviews and tactical knife discussions.